Hello, BookTube. It's Tuesday. It's very late on Tuesday. The day completely got away from me. It was full of text messages and Voxer calls and emails and even a couple of phone calls, like it was the 17th century, and resulting in a huge amount of complication in my own workday for the foreseeable future. But I realized late on that I hadn't made any videos to talk to my imaginary BookTube friends, and it's Tuesday, which is when we do tags. And there is a tag that has started to go around. I've seen a few people do it, including one half of the guys at Codex Cantina. One half of the Codex Cantina guys wandering around in the woods doing a tag. If ever there's a quintessential BookTube activity, that must be it. And it is a tradition on BookTube. It's the mid-year bookish freakout tag, where I'll leave a link to the I think two people originated this tag. I'll leave a link to both of them down below. But the idea is that June means we're halfway through the year. Your reading year is halfway done. So, what are you freaking out about? What are you taking when you take stock? It's natural to do so in June. What does that stock taking look like? I've done this tag a few times. I really enjoy it, but I do it on my own anyway. I was doing the mid-year book freakout tag before there was a BookTube because I make lists, exhaustive lists of new releases and readings that I've done there. I keep track of all of that exhaustively because at the end of every year I make a list of the year's best and worst books in the 15 or 16 genres that I read. And you can't do a list like that if you're not taking notes all through the year. No matter how good you think your memory is, you'll lose a lot if you don't do that. So I do. I take notes. I'm having a fantastic reading year in terms of quantity. So I'm requesting things all the time. I'm getting things all the time. I'm feverishly consuming e-galleys, print galleys, you name it. And always looking for more to make sure I don't miss anything. It's a silly little conceit. I don't actually do it, but the way I organize my reading is that new releases in the American book market in the 15 or 16 genres I read are my remit. They are my bailiwick. I will do other things. I will read older stuff and reread older stuff, but that's the bulk of what I do. And it has been for years. So I'm taking stock extra hard in June anyway, because those lists they already exist now, and theoretically anyway, as they should be half full. Every one of those categories should be half full. Now that's not true, because the publishing industry is not uniform. The American publishing industry tends to pump out titles in the autumn, September to Thanksgiving. So the field is tilted. So I'm not worried if some of those categories aren't at 6 strong. I'm not worried. Or 5 strong. But still, they are filling up, and now's the time when I think about them. So I love doing the mid-year book freakout tag, even though, once again, I'm reminded this year, as in many other years, that there are a lot of questions in this tag that I'm not going to answer, that don't apply to me, or that I want to apply to me. So we'll go through and make what we can of them. So question number 1 is the best book you've read this year. For me, that would be M, Son of the Century, by Antonio Scarlatti. An English language translation by Anne Milano Appel of an Italian historical novel. So it's not a new release, except in English language translation, but it did come out. It's a big, fat novel about the formative years of Benito Mussolini. I always chuckle a little when I say that because it seems inconceivable that that would be a good reading experience, but it is not only a good reading experience, it's a great reading experience. Oftentimes, this won the Strega Prize, Italy's foremost literary prize, and oftentimes the books that win that raise eyebrows outside of Italy. People wonder why this won the Strega Prize. This one, I don't see how it would raise eyebrows. There's been some talk in the Italian press about this being sloppily researched. The talk along those lines is eerily similar to the talk that met Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. The pedants came out of the woodwork to say you got this date wrong or that date wrong. The book is a tremendous reading experience. I wholeheartely recommend it, even though it doesn't seem like it's on your route. You'd still love it if you read it. And here's hoping that it gets noticed in some year-end lists. I feel certain that it will in mine. One of my lists is the year's best works in translation. If M, Son of the Century, is not number 1 on that list, I will be amazed. But no, question number 2 is the best sequel that you've read this year. For me, it hasn't been a good year for sequels. It actually hasn't been a good year for reading so far. I'm holding a lot of hope like I mentioned, the publishing industry is not uniform in how they dispense with their goodies, so it's entirely possible this could end up being a really strong year, but not so far. But for me, it would be Sea Storm by Andrew Mayne, a sequel, the next book in the underwater investigations series that I've talked about a little on this channel. It's a kind of a CSI with scuba tanks. And the main character, she's wonderful, and the writing is really, really good. Really good evocation of Florida. So I'm going to say that. It's a good book. It'll definitely entertain you. You won't regret reading it. You won't regret reading the series, but it's not the speaking of Hilary Mantel, for instance. I would love to be able to answer this question with Bring Up the Bodies as a sequel to Wolf Hall, something amazing. But I have not encountered such a thing yet this year. I hope that I do. Then question number 3 is a new release you haven't read yet but want to, which is kind of funny. And then question number 4 is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I'm going to lump these two together and show you just a random assortment of the hundreds of books that I want to get to before this year is over. I have them ready on the iPad. The first one is an Argonaut novel by Lindsay Sands. These are her sexy, quasi-medieval sword and sorcery vampires. The vampires are really sexy, but they also wear armor and fight each other. They're military badasses. And the books are habit-forming. Let's put it that way. They're not Tolstoy, but they're habit-forming. Then there's Lucy Worsley, who's a historian that I have reviewed a few times in print. And she has a new book. The American release of her latest book is coming out this fall. Agatha Christie, An Elusive Woman. Going to lose the cover if it's mostly white, and that's what this is. This is a slight step down from the design of the UK cover, but I'll take it. It could be a lot worse, as we're going to see. It could be a lot worse. Agatha Christie was not An Elusive Woman, and that depresses my hopes a little for this book. Lucy Worsley is a talented, workmanlike author, but I worry about the subtitle because Agatha Christie was not elusive except for one mystery that she imposed on her own life to goose sales. And yet it is a persistently attractive idea for biographers to say, hey, she wrote mysteries and she kind of was a mystery. No. If it is a universally attractive idea, you should suspect it on that grounds. That usually means it's a bad idea. And it is, in this case, a bad idea. This next one is by Christopher Evans. And this is a book called Do Everything. It's a biography of Frances Willard, who was a crusader for women's rights, for all kinds of great issues. She was on the wrong side of temperance, but I would say that, wouldn't I? If she came over here at Hyde Cottage for wine and calzones, she would have the calzones, but she would argue against the wine. But she was an absolutely fascinating figure, and it's about time she got a full-dress biography for the modern era. I'm hoping that this is good. This is a response to the railing that I'm always doing on this channel about how every season there are 10 Lincoln biographies when there don't need to be. There are thousands of people out there who deserve full-length biographies, led interesting, worthwhile, entertaining lives, and have vast primary source documentation troves that no one's bothering to consult. Write a book about one of those and make it work. Make people interested instead of skating along on the interest they think they already have. So I'm very happy to see this. Hope that it lives up to my expectations. Okay, this next one is a romance novel. There are a few romance novels on this list. This, I think, is indie. It cropped up in an algorithm, and I was immediately intrigued. This is by Louise Bay, and it's called Dr. Off Limits. And the setup could not be any more familiar. The main character has sworn off men because she's about to start her dream job. She goes out on a blind date with a heartthrob who fills out a dress shirt quite well, but says no more is going to come of it, and that's fine by me. Only who's her boss when she goes to work the next day? So I'm not expecting miracles again. This is not Tolstoy, but I don't put only Tolstoy on my forthcoming list. Then this next one is Fred Kaplan, who's a biographer I really, really like. Wrote a biography of John Quincy Adams that I really enjoyed. He is sticking with the Revolutionary era. His new book coming out this fall is His Masterly Pen, a biography of Jefferson the writer. So all the rest of Jefferson will no doubt get trucked in here, but this is more a literary biography. There haven't been many of those for Jefferson, not nearly as many as you would think, considering that both he and all of his contemporaries thought of him as a writer only. They barely ever thought of him as a president or a statesman or a diplomat or anything like that. And he left an amazingly challenging reading body of work behind. It'll be fascinating to see. This would be fascinating anyway, but it's extra fascinating when I know it's in good hands. So I'm looking forward to this. Ordinarily, Revolutionary era books get a slight bit of a wary yawn from me because it's an overcovered area. It's so stereotypical of authors to bring out founding father biographies, in the autumn in the American market. But in this case, this year, there are a couple where I don't mind at all. We're getting to one of those. Well, the next one is fantasy. This is the great Mercedes Lackey. This is Into the West. This is book 2 in her decision to go back and tell the story of Valdemar, her magical kingdom, in which she's written so many books. And I have detected in some of her books in the last 20 years slackening, a flabbiness in her storytelling, but not in these. Not in this and not in its predecessor. I guess maybe this might end up being my favorite sequel. I haven't read it yet, but when I'm looking forward to it, very much so. Didn't think this would work, this series, but it really does. Okay, then we have, this is a historian that I really, really like. I'm really hoping that he doesn't disappoint me with this book. But I have a suspicion. I have my suspicions. This is H.W. Brands. A lot of you read history or biography will know that name. He's written a lot of really good books. And his next book, coming out this fall, is called The Last Campaign, Sherman, Geronimo, and the War for America. And that has me worried. A lot of the stuff just on the front of this book, without delving into it, I haven't read a word of this, has me worried. For a whole bunch of reasons that are not woke, they are not blue checkmark Twitter politics. I have been railing against this very subject for a very long time, a very, very long time. Sherman was a genocidal maniac. That was true even in the American Civil War. There was nothing honorable about him. I don't care if he could come up with a good quip now and then. He was a genocidal monster. And it's to the lasting disgrace of this country that when he was done committing daily war crimes in the American Civil War, when he was done with that, he was given license by a U.S. president to explicitly conduct genocidal warfare against American Indians, against the Native American tribes that were in full possession of their land. This is not a war for America. This is not a war for America. America entered into treaties with Geronimo. America entered into treaties with every single one of those of the peoples, men, women, children, babies, elderly people that Sherman gladly displaced and put on dusty, rocky roads into the desert. To live or not, it's not up to me. I get paid my $3.75 a day no matter what happens. Every one of those nations had signed treaties with the United States of America. Binding treaties. No, nothing had been broken. No, there was no abrogation of those treaties except by the United States of America, often while the ink was still wet. So I don't know what this war for America business is. What Sherman did to Geronimo was not a campaign. That also worries me. This title, it makes it sound like Sherman he's a tired but honorable old soldier, and he's got one last campaign in the war for America. Well, what were the earlier campaigns? Slaughtering men, women, and children, invalids, on his road to the sea, on his march through Georgia. Then, a little bit older, but none the wiser, and still absolutely steeped in bloodlust, he gets turned loose on largely helpless populations of people who were here long before any white person got here, and who had signed binding treaties. They played by the rules. So I don't know. This is an explosive subject. I have almost never seen an American writer do this well, and that's a shame on its own. That's a crime on its own. What I want is H.W. Brands can only do this right in one way, and that is by acknowledging that Sherman and the administration for whom he conducted his last campaign were completely in the wrong. Completely in the wrong. No but, no however, if you look at it this way, no weasel words in order to get him an invitation to Morning Joe. He has to say, this was completely wrong. If he does that, he's not going to do that, but if he does that, then I won't argue with him. We shall see. Here endeth the lecture. Another book, this one will not be causing any kinds of rants, is Brandon Sanderson. This is another Mistborn novel. This is the Lost Metal. And the Mistborn novels sort of leave me cold. They seem to have very little ingenuity stretched over a very large amount of territory. I could almost say the same thing about Brandon Sanderson just in general. But these particularly seem like left-handed exercises. And I think I've read the previous two Mistborn books and just was thoroughly underwhelmed by them. But I keep expecting to be overwhelmed by this guy. I know he has tons and tons of vocal fans on BookTube. So I give everything a try. He's too important a figure for a whole bunch of reasons that don't have anything to do with literature. But still, he's too important a figure for me to ever ignore a book of his. I just hope that this thing has a little more giddy up than the last one did. Then this next one still amazes me. I still can't believe that it's coming out. I'm hoping that someone lets me review it. This is by Troy Senik, and it is called A Man of Iron. And it is a new biography of Grover Cleveland. President Grover Cleveland. Here with a computer-enhanced color photo of his face. A very good approach to a cover. He seems real, right? Look how much more effective that is than a black and white daguerreotype of Grover Cleveland would have been on that you could easily imagine being the choice for a cover of a book like this. Far more effective. You're looking into someone's face. They feel real right away before you read a single word. The advance word on this book is that the author thinks that Cleveland was a remarkable, incredible, upstanding figure who's been unjustly overlooked by American presidential biographies. So this is a book entering into the presidential biography sweepstakes that every autumn produces in the United States. But this might be a genuinely intriguing one. There have been those, right? There was one a few years ago about President McKinley that was fantastic. There were a couple in 2 years in a row about President Hoover that were also really, really good. There was one about Chester A. Arthur that was really good. So it could very well be. I am totally up for it. I believe that I know everything about Grover Cleveland there is to know, but I'd be happy to have this author prove me wrong. So definitely on my list. You'll be hearing about it again on this channel. Then we have Roman history. I sometimes mention in given publishing years or given publishing seasons that Roman history tends to be weak, that there aren't many titles. I thought that was true last year, except we got Julius Caesar and the Roman People, which was really, really good. I have no idea what... There are a couple of Roman histories on my list here. I have no idea what kind of job they'll do, but I have my hopes up. The first one was by Anthony Everett, with an assist by Roddy Ashworth. Anthony Everett will be known to a lot of you. Wrote a biography of Cicero that still sells. His new book is on Nero. Again, we have a white cover, so it might wash out a little. An atypical cover, and here's hoping for an atypical assessment of Nero. Tends to get written off from his own day to ours as a one-dimensional monster. I'm not denying any of the monstrous stuff, but there's a lot more there, and we have the sources to do a fuller, fleshed-out idea of Nero. Worth remembering always, as I always say when the subject comes up and people just want to talk about Nero fiddling while Rome burns or killing all of his relatives by stomping on them or starving them or whatnot. I also want to point out, remind people that the Roman Emperor Trajan, who was one of the most capable men ever to have the job, and presided over the Roman Empire at its largest expanse of territory, when he was asked once who he considered his greatest predecessor in the role, one of his answers was Nero for the first 5 years. He wasn't willing to give Nero, a total pass on all the barbarity, but he was willing to acknowledge that there's more going on here than just the barbarity. I'm hoping that this book does the same. That would be great. Okay, then we have another romance. A few more romances coming up. I look forward to all kinds of things. This is the great Eloisa James. Dude, if there is a surer bet anywhere in the romance genre, I have no idea who it would be. So when I know there's a new Eloisa James book coming out, I know that I'm going to enjoy it. It's just a question of what she's going to do differently or what she's going to do especially well. She has a half dozen strengths as a writer. I'm hoping that she leans into them. This is The Reluctant Countess. This is one of the would-be Wallflower novels. very unusual cover. I'll be interested in seeing if this thing has a step back with a man on the cover, or if it's just going to be this. I could go either way. I'd be happy either way. It's a very unusual romance cover because there's no romance. It's just the Countess. So we shall see. This author can largely do no wrong by me, so I'm up for it either way. Then the next person here, I'm not forgetting the tag. I will wrap this up. The next person here is also an author who can do no wrong by me. I would have been hugely eager for any new book by this author. The fact that it's this new book. The author is Stacy Schiff. I've praised her many, many times. Her book on the Salem witch trials called The Witches is incredible. Her book on Cleopatra is incredible. And her new book is a biography of Samuel Adams, who is one of my 5 guys, who hasn't had the biography that he deserves since one of his own kinfolk did it over 100 years ago. I am ecstatic that this is Stacy Schiff's new book. Absolutely ecstatic. I will love it. I will write about it no matter what anyone else does. But it's a Founding Father biography. He's a largely forgotten Founding Father, but it's a Founding Father biography coming out in America in the autumn. So this will not be overlooked. And that's incredible. That's incredible. Well, one of the few things in the bookish calendar that truly makes me happy. And speaking of the Salem witch trials, we have another book, not so much just on Salem, but on the whole subject of witchcraft and the supernatural in the New World. It's by Malcolm Gaskell. It came out in the UK last year, and it's coming out in America this year. It's called The Ruin of All Witches, and as far as I know, unless there's a last-minute come-to-Jesus moment of good sense, this is its cover. Fortunately, there's more to a book than a cover. But this is a broader look. From what I've heard and from what I've read, I read all the reviews of the UK release. This deals with a much broader canvas than just the outbreak at Salem. And that's great, because there were a lot of such outbreaks. And a lot of Americans don't know that story. They go by the millions to Salem every year as tourists. But they don't know how widespread this phenomenon was, and they don't know some of the details of all the other stories. So very much looking forward to this, no matter what it looks like, no matter how Satan has cursed it. Then this next one is a follow-up to something from last year. Last year I got a gorgeous hardcover illustrated Lord of the Rings. A lot of you commented on it. Just a beautiful, beautiful volume with Tolkien's own illustrations, lovingly restored and sprinkled throughout the text. I did a video. I showed it to you, and I also wrote a review of it. It was a hit with readers. They really, really liked it. And later on this year, it's getting a companion. It's getting the illustrated Silmarillion, also with illustrations by the author. Well, that has never been done before, as far as I know. So this will have the die-cut slipcase. It will have the artwork on the naked hardcover. It will have probably the tinted pages, probably in blue. It'll have maps. It'll have all of those illustrations. It will be lovely. Probably if they do it up like they did Lord of the Rings, there'll also be a special edition that's even more lovely that a mere reviewer will not get, but that you could get if you wanted to. So if you have that Lord of the Rings edition sitting on your shelf and you just lovingly look at it, it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. You're going to want this, right? You're going to want there's a space right next to it. You're going to want this as a companion volume to it. And I won't miss the opportunity to write about the Silmarillion. I would never miss an opportunity to write about the Silmarillion. And then this next one is by Jory John and Pete Oswald. It is the latest book in a series that I've been singing the praise of these things for 5 years on this channel. They are kids' books, they are picture books, and they are wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. This is The Sour Grape. Sorry, I'm trying to get this to behave. We've got, there we go. This is The Sour Grape, the follow-up to in a series that includes The Bad Seed or The Good Egg, and these are wonderful, absolutely. Well, they're all about the eponymous food item that there are a number of them. You know, the Good Egg, The Bad Seed, that sort of thing that we just associate with that phrase, and the sour grape is one of them. I don't know if this is the last one in the series, but I'm very much looking forward to it. There's always a heartbreaking turn at the end as well. Then we have another must-read. This is John Connolly's new book, The Furies, the latest in his series about a supernatural investigator. These are hard to describe. They've been going on for 20 years. They're amazingly good. They are supernatural thrillers, but if you're accustomed to supernatural thrillers and you haven't ever read these operate on a slightly, a very much more literary plane. You might not be ready for how good a supernatural thriller can be until you read one of these books. So I strongly recommend it. And you can jump in anywhere with any of them. And then this next one, also in the autumn, is historical novel. It's a follow-up. It's Maggie O'Farrell. This is The Marriage Portrait. This is her follow-up to the huge success of her book Hamnet. And this is set in the Italian Renaissance, in the Medici household. So I'm on board already. I was on board with Hamnet, and I'm on board already with this. This author has an amazing way with a narrative, so I really, much like Stacy Schiff, I really wouldn't have cared what the next book was about. I would still have gone straight to it. But the fact that it's set in one of my favorite time periods is so much the better. Then we have another romance. This is by the prolific J.R. Ward. I have been reading J.R. Ward for years. I cannot recommend the Black Dagger Brotherhood or the Black Dagger Brotherhood Prison Camp series. I cannot recommend the latest ones. I want to. I wish I could. But these really are books in series. And the author, I know I always say on this channel that if the author writes book 20 in a series and you open it and can't make any sense out of it, that's the author's fault. I'm pretty sure that J.R. Ward would agree that a large part of these books now is for established fans. She has an army of them. So, although I am looking forward to this latest book in the Black Dagger Brotherhood Prison Camp series, I can't imagine why. Although I am looking forward to The Viper, I can't actually recommend this as a place to jump on. I don't know that it will make any sense to you. I would suggest either go to the first book in this series or go all the way to the early books in the Black Dagger Brotherhood series itself. Again, we're talking about, super hot warrior supernatural beings, much like Lindsay Sands. They're very similar. This will be the latest one. No idea when the date on this is. Greatly looking forward to it. And then we'll end with more Roman history. We'll finish out with Josiah Osgood has a book on Roman history called Uncommon Wrath, How Caesar and Cato's Deadly Rivalry Destroyed the Roman Republic. So this is another book of popular release Roman history. I think this is Random House, so it doesn't get more popular than that. This is not one of the specialty history publishers that Peg covers on the history shelf. This is as popular as it gets. And I find those interesting. I think there are fewer of them every year, and that worries me a little. I am a little bit perturbed by the title here, much like with the W.H. Brands. I'm a little perturbed at the title here. Cato had no hand in destroying the Roman Republic. None. The fact that Cato didn't like Gaius Julius Caesar does not in any way play into Gaius Julius Caesar's decision to destroy the Roman Republic for his own personal gain. Cato is not to blame. It is not, if they could have just looked up from their personal squabbles long enough, they would have patched up things and saved the Republic. So I'm hoping that this is just cover title copy and that the book doesn't say anything as ridiculous as that at all. I'm hoping that that's the case. We shall see. But that's a tiny handful of the books that are coming out. I actually thought, when I was doing this tag, I actually thought about just doing an hour and a half, going through everything that's coming out, all the new releases that are coming out that I intend to get to, or even some that I don't, and just talking about them. I might still do that. That would probably be an interesting video, especially for those of you who, are looking ahead to your own autumns and wondering what's out there, what's coming out, and whatnot. But anyway, we've spent quite enough time on those two questions. Let's move on. Question number 5 is the biggest disappointment. For me, that would be The Empress Maria Theresa by Barbara Stolberg-Rillinger, which had an English-language translation, even though it's a 1,000-page long biography of a figure from history who's utterly fascinating, but nobody knows anymore. Common readers of history don't. The Empress Maria Theresa is no more than a footnote to them, even though she led an utterly fascinating life. I was looking forward to the book, and it sort of fell flat for me. And Britta Bowler, fellow booktuber Britta Bowler, said that that surprises her because she read it when it first came out in German 3 years ago and thought it was really, really good. And that's not opinion I'm willing to disregard. So she suggested that I order a copy of the German edition so that at least I don't miss out on the book. And I think she was intending that I pay for that copy. I'm of course not going to pay for a new release. So I have set the wheels in motion to get a copy from a connection in the publishing industry rather than pay for a German edition. But I don't know how much that will change things. I went into this big book. It's a big 1,000-page biography of a fascinating figure. And I went into it wanting to like it. And didn't. I thought it was boring. Boring. And, okay, Britta's suggestion, on one hand, yes, I shouldn't miss the book. But on the other hand, this is the book in the English market. So reading and enjoying the German version would only give me a reason to say that this was boringly translated. I don't think it will send me back to the English language version with a better appreciation. I was going in wanting to appreciate it. I think it largely fails in English, but we shall see. We shall see. That hasn't happened yet. So then let's see here. The number 6 is the biggest surprise for me. This would be Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart, the author of Shugibane, one of the most lauded premier or debut novels in recent years. And there's the myth in the publishing industry of the sophomore slump, where an author, especially a much lauded author, goes to write their second book and it falls apart. It fails. It's either a reworked draft of something they couldn't sell originally, or it's something they did hurriedly while they were still working off the throes of their endless book tour for their hit. Whatever the reason is, second novels tend to be lackluster, and this one wasn't. It was fantastic. I went into it willing to give the author as much credit in the world, but thinking, it's sort of like going to the piano recital from a friend's kid. You go in expecting that you're going to make polite nods, but it's not going to be good. And instead, this was really, really good. That was a bit of a surprise for me. And question number 7 is your favorite new author, debut, or new to you. Again, this hasn't been a stellar year for me reading-wise yet. It could end up being that way. I've read more books than ever, but favorite debut, the thing that came to mind was Holding Her Breath by an author named Amor Ryan. It's the one that I think has stuck with me the most. As a debut, I thought it was really, really good, really, really confident, and convincingly multi-layered. So maybe that would count. I don't really know. Obviously, favorite here has to be taken with a grain of salt, heavy air quotes. Because if it were a true favorite, if it blew me away, I wouldn't be having any of these hems and haws. You haven't heard them about some of the other books in this tag. I haven't encountered a debut yet that has blown me away. I have in previous years. I did with Shugibane. I have with plenty of others, but not so far this year. It could happen tomorrow, for all I know. But and then we get into a bunch of questions that are a little bit harder for me to answer. Like, for instance, number 8 is your newest fictional crush. Heavy sigh. I don't have fictional crushes. I'm not 13. Number 9 is newest favorite character. I don't really think about characters that way. I don't line them up, favorite or least favorite. Number 10 is book that made you cry. It's possible that if you opened my abdomen and inserted a book without anesthesia, I might cry. But other than that, I'm afraid it's not going to happen. And then number 11 is a book that made you happy. All books make me happy, even rotten ones. I grappled with a rotten one earlier today, and even that made me happy. Believe it or not. Not because I'm a masochist, but because I absolutely love the Republic of Letters. I love the world of books. Just love it. I am so happy that I get to be playing around in that world every day. I'm so happy about that even the bad books make me happy. I know that probably doesn't sound like it makes much sense, but it's true. Then number 12 is the most beautiful book you bought so far this year or received. And I mean, maybe last year something would have stood out like that illustrated Lord of the Rings, but is that beautiful? I don't really know. I don't think I see books in the right way to answer this question. And number 13 is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? I showed you 20 of them, and there are 200 more where those came from. I will be attempting to read every major mainstream new release in the 15 or 16 genres I read in the American book market from June until early December. That is my intent. That is my goal. That is my remit. I can't do that, but I want to come close. I want to come closer than anyone else in the English-speaking world does. Not because it means anything, not because it matters, but because it pleases me. I want to come as close to that goal as I can. So there's a huge number of books that I need to read before the end of the year. I'm thinking strongly about doing another video just on that. Forthcoming stuff. Just that. Not just June, but July, August, September, October, November, all the way until December. Just a gigantic video walking you through, picture by picture, forthcoming stuff. What might be of interest to you, why it's of interest to me, what history I have with any of the authors. I think that might be a lot of fun to do. So I'll maybe work on that. But in the meantime, that is my mid-year book freakout tag, the 2022 version. Long, as always, but sorry about that. Get me talking about this sort of thing, I could go easily 3 times as long. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up and try to post it before Tuesday is over. But I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.